Today on D3Live, we're going to be talking about the next generation of iPod Touch along with iOS 5. So it's starting to get a little bit later in the year, the rumors and all that kind of stuff is really starting to pick up. So what I'm going to do today is condense what all I've heard, what all I expect, and what all of us expect to see in the next generation of iPod Touch along with iOS 5. So to begin with, we're going to talk a little about the iPod Touch. Now, of course, every year Apple updates their iPhone, iPod Touch, and now the iPad lines. So we've got a good idea of what to expect. Now, the first thing is the Apple A5 dual-core CPU. This is the same way it came. There was a new last year Apple A4 in the iPad, then it came out in the iPhone 4, then it finally came out in the iPod Touch. So I absolutely expect to see the same processor from the iPad trickle down to both the iPhone and the iPod Touch later this year. And now what that will mean is that internet browsing will be much faster, and especially in games, the graphical performance is going to be much superior to the current generation of processors in the iPhone and the iPod Touch. So that's going to be a big deal, but as far as gaming and all that kind of good stuff, always more speed is better. Now, as far as the actual design itself goes, not really 100% sure. There's a couple of there's a couple of different ideas of what's floating around as far as what we're going to see. On the one hand, it might be just basically a super minor upgrade, just like when they did with the third generation, meaning there's not going to be any major hardware improvements or whatever. It's going to look basically the same, just some internal stuff, speed and all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, though, there's a lot of talk about a larger display on the iPhone, and of course I would imagine that it would trickle down to the iPod Touch. So what that would mean is that a larger screen, perhaps 3.7 inches or so, maybe even a little bit bigger than that, and the same footprint, which means that it basically would just get rid of a lot of the bezel, just kind of stretch out a little bit more, which of course is always good, and it should remain a Retina display. Now, as far as that goes, I'm not 100% sure if we're going to see that. I would expect we would see on the iPhone, but whether it actually comes down to iPod Touch, I'm not 100% sure. But at any rate, I don't think a slightly bigger screen is going to make all that big of a difference. Now, one thing that I am really hoping for to see in the next iPod Touch is a better camera. Now, of course, having a camera in the iPod Touch, that's great, but the one that they put in the iPod Touch 4th generation is not very good at all. It does shoot 720p video, but the 0.7 megapixel stills are not good in the slightest. I don't care which way you look at it. They're really small, and they just don't look that great. So what I hope for is they could increase the camera quality. I'm not asking for something as good as on the iPhone 4. Of course, that's a fairly thick sensor. Would probably require them redesigning a lot of it, making the iPod Touch a bit thicker. But I really do believe that they could make a better quality camera inside the iPod Touch 5th generation. So that's mostly what I'm looking for. As far as when we can expect to see this, typically we do see it in September. However, it looks like the iPhone 5 is going to be pushed back to September. So we might see it in September, or it might even be a little bit farther. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But I would imagine it would probably be in the September to October timeframe. Now, moving on to the software side, and of course it's going to apply a lot to the iPhone 5 as well, is iOS 5. Now, iOS 5 is, again, something that we've been waiting for quite a while. It's going to be the next generation operating system for both the iPhone, the iPod Touch, and eventually the iPad. Now, there are a lot of speculations, a lot of people who've been talking about iOS 5, and there's probably going to be a lot of big features. So I'm going to try to condense it down to some of the bigger ones that I think are going to be the most important. So the first of which is widget support. This is not confirmed. We don't know this is going to happen, but I absolutely would really love if they bring widgets over just like on Android. Now, if you've ever used an Android device, you'll know that there are a wide variety of widgets that let you, to look at the time, weather, turn on and off Wi-Fi. There's a wide variety of stuff, and you can do it all straight from your home screen. So, it's really quick. You don't have to go into settings and all that kind of good stuff. Something else I expect to see in the next version of iOS 5 is better Facebook and Twitter integration. So of course there are standard Facebook and Twitter apps that are available. They work really quite nicely. But what I would like to see is better integration into the OS itself. And there's been a lot of talk about this. Most have been called the Friends Stream feature. Now, as far as how it works exactly, I don't really know. But overall, if it's going to help you get at your Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff a lot easier, I'm all for it. Now that's most of what I expect to see. Now, of course, there are other things such as like a UI overhaul, but I won't really get into that right now. But suffice it to say, I believe that both the iPod Touch 5th generation and iOS 5 should be a solid upgrade. Okay, so for the second segment of D3 Live, I'm going to be taking live questions from everyone in the chat. So there are a lot of people in here right now, so just going to go ahead and take some questions and see what you guys have to say. Is it more realistic if the iPod Touch 5th generation has a 2 megapixel camera? I think it's somewhere along the lines of what I was thinking. I don't really think that we need 1080p video or like a 5 megapixel camera or anything like that, but I'm just hoping for an improvement. I mean, the 0.7 megapixels, that's just, I mean, that was okay in 1998, but this is 2011. That just doesn't cut it in my opinion. Do I think it will cost considerably more? No, I'm pretty sure. I mean, they typically have always lowered the price. Now, with the recent generation, they did raise it to, I believe, about $30 or so. But I think if it costs any more, I think it's going to be a small amount. I don't think it's going to be, like, dramatically more expensive. In fact, it might even be a little bit cheaper knowing Apple. What devices will have iOS available? Yeah, that's actually a great point. If you guys are not familiar with the earlier version, just recently they dropped support for the iPhone 3GS and the iPod Touch 2nd generation. So a lot of people are kind of a little worried about whether their devices are ever going to get updates or not. I can tell you this: I would be surprised if the iPhone 3GS and the iPod Touch third generation of devices never see iOS 5. I think it's possible. I mean, we never know what features they decide to add, but in my opinion, I would be pretty surprised if they don't at least see iOS 5. They've pretty much gotten to the deal where, if it comes out in iOS 2, you see iOS 3 and iOS 4. So hopefully, yeah, you will at least get one more major update. Will Apple change iOS 5 multitasking? Great question. That's something that I really honestly don't have any clue about. I certainly hope that they would. The multitasking, it works decently, but I'm not a huge fan of having to scroll through, and it's just not a seamless experience in my opinion. But yeah, I honestly have no idea. I mean, I think that there are some things that they could do, but whether they will actually do it or not, no idea. Anyway, guys, that's about it for this episode of D3 Live. If you enjoyed, feel free to subscribe. I do this every Saturday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, so if you'd like, you can go ahead and watch the show live on Blog TV, or you can watch the pre-recorded episodes on YouTube.